Hey, it's Marley, aka Type 1 Reader, and welcome to my January reading wrap-up. So I'm filming this a little bit early. It's not quite the end of January yet, but my current read, I just know that I'm probably not going to finish it before the end of the month because historically the books in this series take me a little while to get through. So I'm just filming this a little bit prematurely. I don't anticipate finishing any more books. So as always, let's start out talking about a few stats of my reading for the month. So in January, I read 9 books, so that's great. This amounted to about 2,981 pages. Clearly, I am going to be reading more pages of Onyx Storm, but for now, that's where I'm at. And then hours listened for audiobooks is 22 hours. My average rating is 3.6, which I feel is pretty typical. It's always 3 point something. Books acquired is 3. I bought 3 books this year so far, and I had 2 books that were considered own voices. In terms of the genre breakdown, it is a little bit split here. I read 3 horror books because I participated in Winterween, which I have a vlog up about that readathon, so definitely check that out if you'd like. I read 2 romance and 2 thriller, and then 1 historical and then 1 fantasy. In terms of format, we have quite the split here. Normally I don't read audiobooks, but this month I actually listened to 2 audiobooks and I read 2 physical books, and then the rest were ebooks. The other 5 were ebooks. In terms of the audience of the books that I read, 7 of them were considered adult. 1 of them I would consider new adult and 1 is young adult. In terms of author gender, I read from 7 female authors and 2 male. And in terms of the author status to me of whether I've read from them before or not, I read from 6 new authors and 3 that I had read from before. So definitely branching out, reading a lot of new authors so far. And then in terms of years published, this is quite a variety as well. I read 2 books that were released last year in 2024, 1 from 2023 and 1 from 2021, and then 2 from 2020, 1 from 2018, 1 from 2014, and 1 from 2012. So very all over the place in terms of year published. Okay, now let's get into the actual book reviews. I'm going to talk about them in the order of my lowest rated book to my highest rated book. So stick around to see my favorite book of the month. In terms of my least favorite book of the month, I would probably say that's Her Pretty Face by Robyn Harding. This is one of the first books I read this year. One of the least memorable. I feel like I'm struggling to even remember it, but this was one of the audiobooks I listened to, and I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like every thriller audiobook I listen to is a 3-star. Like, I never enjoy them that much. They always just feel very mid and are not memorable. So I rated this one 3 stars. It's about a woman and her family, I believe, has moved, and her son is having some trouble at school, having some trouble fitting in, and she's also kind of having trouble fitting in with these parents. But then she does befriend this one woman who actually is really nice to her. Their sons actually get along. It seems like this great situation. But then we find out that this woman is keeping some dark secrets, and our main character has to figure out what they are. I believe we're also getting flashback scenes as well to a previous crime and a previous court case, and so you're trying to make connections between the past and the present to see what exactly is going on and if people are really who they say they are. I feel like as I'm describing this, as I said, I'm really not remembering a ton of this book, which just kind of shows like I don't overly recommend it. It's not memorable. And another thing I in particular didn't like about this book is as I read it, I realized it was actually basically copying a real life murder case that actually is pretty local to me. So I think that's why I was in particular familiar with it. Maybe some other people wouldn't, like people who live in the States, but it was actually seemed to be based on a real Canadian serial killer case. And I just didn't really love the fact that it just seemed disrespectful to me, or kind of icky that this author had just like taken that story for her own. And then when I finished the book, because I didn't remember all the details of this case, it was the Karla Homolkin case. Maybe a spoiler for the book. If you don't want to be spoiled, then don't look into what that case is. But as I refreshed myself with the details of this real case, I realized just how much she had copied from the real life case. So I don't know if you're someone who's like, fine with taking things from real life cases. Maybe people are, but in this case, I don't know, I just felt weird about it, that she was like using that as her inspiration when this is like a real situation with real victims. So I don't know, didn't feel great about this book, and it's too bad. This is my first Robyn Harding book that I've ever read. She seems to be a pretty popular thriller author. I definitely seen her name around, so not really sure if I'm gonna continue reading her books or not. The other book I rated 3 stars this month was My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. This was my book club book with my friends. Didn't love it as much as I would have liked to, but I also didn't really expect for it to be a favorite. This is a historical fiction about these girls who grew up in Italy. I think it actually was translated from Italian to English. This first book is taking place, I believe, in the 50s and 60s. We're following our main character, who I believe her name is Elena, and her friendship with Leela, who's her best friend growing up, and their lives. It basically just follows up until the point of them being, I think, about 16 or 17 years old. It's a series, so I think there are 3 other books that follow the rest of their lives. I just did not feel like I enjoyed it enough to continue the series. I wish it was one book and I could figure out or see what happens in the rest of their lives. The fact that it's dragged out to 4 books, I don't know, I don't really love that. Basically, it was just, I guess, a coming of age, just following these girls' lives. So there wasn't really a lot of plot besides just seeing how they became friends, how they both had different paths in life for different reasons, some of their different boys that they dated, and things going on in their neighborhoods. So if you are interested in that type of book, you could definitely check it out. I think it's pretty popular, and it even has a TV show adaptation. But for me personally, I just don't love historical to start with, and I just think there's a lot of other books, a lot of different genres I enjoy more. So this definitely wasn't bad by any means, but it just was not a favorite. All right, next up, I did read The Patient by Jasper Dewitt. This is one of the horror books that was featured in my Winterween reading blog. So this is a bit of a shorter horror. It is following a main character who is a new psychologist, and he starts working at this new hospital. He gets very intrigued by this one patient who has a very mysterious past. He's been at this hospital for basically his whole life, like since he was 6 years old, I believe, and now he's like, I don't know, in his 50s or something like that. He has never had like a real exact diagnosis. Everyone who's treated him over the years has come up with different theories, and there's a lot of mystery and ominousness surrounding him, as so many of the people who have treated him have ended up dead. So there's a bit of a mystery of, is this like psychological, is this supernatural, and our main character wants to figure it out. I'm still getting used to reading horror. It's not one of my top genres, so I feel like I really did like this, but I think similar to how I was talking about historical not being my favorite genre, I think it's similar where horror just doesn't hit as hard for me as like a thriller or a fantasy. So I feel like this was a good horror for what it was, but it just wasn't gonna be my favorite book just with the nature of what it was, if you know what I'm saying. But I feel like it is good for a horror. It's written like a creepypasta, if that's something that interests you, those kind of internet online ghost stories. Overall, I would recommend this, but I don't know why I just have trouble rating books higher than 3.5 lately. I'm rating so many books 3.5 stars. Like, I don't know what's up with me. I'm really trying to be strict about my 4 stars and 5 stars. I don't know. Yeah, so speaking of 3.5 star horrors, I also read Bunny by Mona Awad in that Winterween vlog as well. This is a really popular horror book. It is about a main character, Samantha, who goes to this creative writing university. She's a bit of a loner, doesn't really fit in, kind of depressed and lonely character. And then there is this group of girls in her program, and they call themselves the Bunnies. They kind of feel like a little cult because they all call each other Bunny. They're kind of weirdly intimate with each other. And then Samantha ends up being invited to go to one of their Summit Salon meetings, and she kind of gets indoctrinated into this cult a little bit. This was a good horror book again that I actually would recommend. I feel like it's one that maybe initially I didn't love, but now as time's gone by, it's really like stuck with me, like the themes of it, and like this isn't one that I'm gonna forget about, like Her Pretty Face. I feel like this is more of a memorable book, and I guess I read it just in time because I heard that there is a sequel coming out as well, or a prequel or something. But yeah, it's very much for fans, I would say, of literature, of writing, of the creative creative process. I liked that it had a little bit more of like an open ending to it, up to your interpretation. But I wish I loved it more because it was so hyped up. I wish I could have just been one of those people who loved it as much as some of the people I've seen. I feel like I was expecting it to be more weird or just different than what it ended up being, but yeah, that's my thoughts on Bunny. The last book I rated 3.5 stars. My favorite rating is Here We Go Again by Alison Cochrun. This is a contemporary romance book about these two women. It's the one I read most recently, so I should remember it the best. Rosemary and Logan were childhood friends, and then they ended up getting into a fight and becoming rivals or like hating each other throughout high school and beyond. And now they are both English teachers at the high school that they went to in their hometown, continuing to dislike each other for whatever reason. But their favorite teacher that was really inspiring and impressionable for both of them, he ends up telling them, hey, I'm dying from cancer and I want to go on this last road trip this summer to kind of have a nice like end to my life, like see a bunch of sites I've never seen, and end up in Maine where he has a house he wants to like pass away in. So our two main characters are reluctant to, you know, be forced together in this van on a road trip together, but they're like, we both really care about this teacher and we obviously want to do this for him. So we have a lot of fun tropes. We have friendship to lovers, childhood friends, enemies to lovers, second chance, forced proximity. And so I was so excited for this book. And obviously I was a little bit disappointed with it, as is reflected in my rating. As you can imagine, with it being so focused on this man who has cancer and death, it got quite depressing, which is similar to Alison Cochrun's other book that I read, The Charm Offensive. I liked that book. I liked the romance and the mental health rep, but it just got to be so like serious and depressing. I remember it kind of like triggered me a little with the anxiety stuff going on. And in that book, I think the couple got together too soon. And so it's interesting because in this book, it was kind of the same issues. Like there were a lot of goofy, fun, cute moments between the two women and with the other characters involved in the book as well, but it just was so sad. It was so sad and depressing and not exactly what you want when you're reading a contemporary romance. And I do feel like the slow burn of the romance could have been developed a little bit better for me to like it a little bit more. That being said, still a good romance, like still overall would recommend it, but yeah, just because of those little things, I'm like, I wish it was a little bit different. But yeah, I'm still open to reading more of this author's work. Next up, I read volume 5 of Fullmetal Alchemist. This is a manga series that I've been slowly making my way through. Now, this was the very first book I read this year, and so I feel like I'm not remembering it as well, but I gave it 4 stars, which is what I've given most volumes in the series. Overall, I just am enjoying this story and these characters. I've said it a million times. It's interesting talking about manga because you just always have to talk about the initial premise. You can't really talk any further than that to avoid spoilers, but it's about these two brothers who are involved in like alchemy. When they were trying to bring their mom back to life, they accidentally like caused themselves to be like injured. Like one of the brothers doesn't even have like a body and the other brother lost some of his body parts. So they're kind of on a quest to like get their bodies back. There's a bunch of different villains. There's a bunch of side characters. I do feel like I care a lot more about those two main brother characters than any of the side characters. So I'm wondering if that will kind of be something I don't like, is if we veer off to focus on more of these side characters. But anyway, still enjoying it, and hopefully I will continue to make progress on this series throughout the year. All right, next up, we have a bit of an unexpected book that I really enjoyed, and that was Magnolia Parks by Hastings. So this is technically as a romance or like a drama book. I originally was not interested in this at all when I heard it's about a toxic relationship, because I'm not someone who's really into toxic romances. But then I saw people like Books and Lala enjoy it, and I think Katie Colson as well just really loved it. And I feel like these are people who, I mean, they like romance. Well, they're not really romance readers, right? They're more like horror readers. So the fact that they really enjoyed this book, I was like, oh, like I'm kind of interested. Yeah, I really liked this book. I really actually loved this book. I would describe it as kind of like Gossip Girl. Not that I've ever watched Gossip Girl, but it's basically about rich people, drama, romance, pettiness. We have the two main characters, Magnolia and BJ. They grew up in the same circles. You know, they're both rich kids in London. And so they dated when they were younger. But in present day, we know that BJ cheated on Magnolia a few years ago, and they have been broken up for like 3 years. But even though they've been broken up, they're still like very, very close. That's what I mean. It's like a toxic, codependent relationship. They still like sneak into each other's bedrooms and like sleep in the same bed, not doing anything, but still just like being together. But over these years, they just keep hurting each other. They like can't figure it out. He'll sleep with all these other girls, which upsets Magnolia. She'll date these other guys and be seen in public with them, and that upsets BJ. And it's just this cycle of toxicity and codependency between them, but very entertaining to watch. Like, I didn't expect to enjoy something like this, but the way that Hastings writes this is just really well done. It's quite funny. It has that kind of British humor to it. There's also like multiple other love interests for Magnolia, like at least 2 other ones, and I actually shipped her with both of them as well. It's just definitely for someone who likes rich person drama, love triangles, messiness. So if you are into that kind of thing, then I would recommend this. The reason that I didn't rate it higher is because I wasn't expecting it to be a cliffhanger ending. So I'll just warn you about that. It is a series, but I didn't realize like it wasn't just a companion series where you end the couple's story in that book. It actually is a continuation. So just be aware of that so you have the correct expectations. I also didn't love the kind of gender double standard that was happening where BJ would sleep with all these women, but then Magnolia would not sleep with anyone. The only person she's ever slept with was BJ. And so I don't know if the author was trying to say something with that, but there were just a few things like that that didn't sit right with me, but otherwise loved it. Another book I enjoyed and didn't totally expect to was Good Bad Girl by Alice Feeney. Now, Alice Feeney is a thriller author I have loved in the past. Probably one of my favorite thriller authors, to be honest, but I saw some not great reviews about this book in particular, but I'm here to say I still really liked it. Gave it 4 stars. So this book's plot is like a little bit convoluted. I'll say that we follow multiple women. The very first chapter, the prologue, is like a flashback to this woman in a grocery store. She's very overwhelmed with this new baby. She's barely sleeping. She's so tired, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden the baby disappears from its stroller. So we know at the beginning of the book, like, a baby has been stolen. That's a fact. That's a crime that's happened. And then we flash forward and we're following all these women. We're following an older lady who is in a senior's home. We're following her daughter. We're following this like young woman working at the retirement or senior's home. We're following another woman, and we're trying to piece together like what's the connection with all these women. So as you can imagine, it very much deals with mother-daughter relationships. And even though a lot of it was kind of straightforward, predictable, I actually ended up quite enjoying it by the end. I feel like there were a few additional twists I didn't expect. And Alice Feeney's writing is always just so addictive for me. I just overall enjoyed it more than I expected to. And then the last book to talk about was my favorite book of the month. That was We Used to Live Here by Marcus Kliewer. This was also featured in the Winterween reading vlog. It is a horror book that I'm sure you must have heard of because it was really popular last year. Obviously, this was my favorite horror book that I read. I still didn't get the full 5 stars. I gave it 4.5 because, as I talked about before, I'm still figuring out my relationship with horror. But this book is about a woman. She has recently moved into this house with her partner and they're gonna fix it up. At the beginning of the book, her partner is out running errands when this family shows up on their doorstep. The dad is like, hey, I used to live here, I grew up here, can I show my kids around? Obviously our main character is like, I don't want to let these strangers into my house, that's weird. But she's a little bit of a people pleaser. She's more of like an anxious person, and she does end up letting them into the house. And from there, chaos ensues. Things happen that cause the people to like not seem to leave the house. It's getting a little bit weird, it's getting creepy. Other weird things are happening around the house, around the property. One of my favorite things about this book was truly how scared I was reading it. I think some horror is not necessarily like, ooh, I'm scared, I'm shaking in my boots. It's more just like making commentary and stuff. But this was genuinely scary. I felt like I was watching a horror movie and things were gonna like pop out and have jump scares. So if you want that kind of vibe, I would recommend this. Haunted house vibe, kind of supernatural or paranormal or whatever. There's a mystery, like what is going on. I liked not knowing too much about it going in, so so I'm not going to say too much. But by the end, I don't know, it was one of those things where I'm like, I thought I was going to give it 5 stars throughout the whole book, and at the end I just couldn't. It's like something was just missing for me at the very end. Things wrapped up too nicely. I don't know how to explain it, but basically I did really enjoy the book. Would really recommend to everyone if you want to read this kind of book, obviously. Yeah, I'm really glad that I am branching out and reading from some different genres. Sometimes they are a hit and sometimes they're a miss, but I'm really glad that I checked this one out, and I think there might be more books in this series potentially, so I will be checking those out. So that is all I read in January, other than whatever I can get through of Onyx Storm in the next few days. Definitely let me know down below if you have thoughts on any of these books, if you've read them, or if I've convinced you to check any of them out. Yeah, I hope you had a great first month of 2025. Please subscribe for more bookish videos, book recommendations, and all that stuff. And I'll see you soon with a brand new video. Bye!